when we talk about winning, I think people's minds straight away jump to, drivers standing on the top step of the podium. I don't see it that way. I see winning as success across an organization. So I think leadership strategies in Formula One are quite unique, but I think all of them can be applied into a business. And I think, businesses across all sectors can take learnings of things that, we've focused and prioritized on over the years. I mean, we're a team sport, competing at an incredibly high level with ultra competitive teams. And so first and foremost, we spend a lot of time on teamwork and collaboration. We're really trying to make sure that everybody across the organization is working towards common goals, understanding the objectives, and really kind of invested in each other and invested in each other's success. Whilst we're, the level of competition in Formula One is so high that, these marginal gains that we can get from everybody accepting compromise can have a huge impact. At Haas F1 specifically, we're a much smaller team than most others on the grid. One of our strengths, and again, I think this applies nicely into business, is having that very agile approach. So, we're really looking at trying to how to shift and shape. We're seeing all over the media all the time about how industry, technology in particular, is having, huge impacts into business and is moving at a real rate. So again, having elasticity in the ability to shift to different scenarios for us is hugely important, particularly on race weekends. We spend ultra amounts of time preparing, getting everything ready, and then you just need a weather incident or an incident on track or a component failure, and all of a sudden the strategy across the race weekend changes. So really ensuring that the mindset of people is agile and able to react is important. And then probably my final one would be innovation, really pushing boundaries in Formula One. Innovation, we've seen numerous examples. For the Formula One fans that are listening to this, they'll remember things like the double diffuser in 2009 with Brawn GP. A huge innovation, really changed the landscape of the 2009 season. McLaren's F-duct in 2010 was another big one. And so really finding innovations that can almost shape an industry. If you're the first person to get that innovation, you're the person that can benefit from the earliest, noting that your competitors are going to catch up. But whilst you've got that advantage, you can leverage it and make the most of it before that happens. I think culture in general is hugely important, and I think this has become more so probably in the last decade. Collaboration as part of that culture being, one vertical. Within our world, we spend a lot of time focusing on how we work together effectively. We talked earlier about having common goals, defined objectives that we know that everybody is working towards, and understanding that there's going to be compromise. I've worked in businesses before where there's exceptional lanes of people working towards their own set of objectives, and some of them doing an incredible job at it. Without that visibility and without that common set of objectives, everybody sometimes is almost working in contrast to each other. So a lot of the work that we've put in F1, again, to get to that kind of marginal gains of competitiveness, is saying, okay, if you've got a particular department that's working on something, guess what? They might actually have to compromise a little bit of their objectives and their resource or their investment in order to put that into another area of the business that perhaps needs additional attention. But if you've got a culture across the whole business and everyone's looking at the top of the triangle, then that compromise almost doesn't have to be a decision. It doesn't have to be a department that says, oh, okay, I'm going to give you up some of my headcount or some of my fiscal resource in order to, for somebody else to use it. That doesn't become a thing. It's almost like this pool of resource or pool of energy that everybody works within. And that compromise, if the culture's done right, that compromise doesn't actually become a thing. It doesn't become a conscious thing in somebody's mind of compromise. It just automatically happens. And so everybody, those lanes that I mentioned earlier, they merge into this kind of virtual triangle where at the top of the triangle is business success. I think there's multifacets of this. I think that clear vision and purpose, I think, is hugely important. And having that self-belief and confidence across the organization to get to wherever that organization is trying to get to. And that takes loads of different sort of energies almost to do it. Having people that are focused on those objectives, reminded of those, and the discipline across the organization to achieve it. Because winning, when we talk about Formula One, when we talk about winning, I think people's minds straight away jump to, drivers standing on the top step of the podium. I don't see it that way. I see winning as success across an organization. The result on a race weekend, that's just the output of the winning mindset. If all of those facets of winning mindset and culture come together, then the results just come. That it's like a byproduct of it. I think you almost come down from the concept of winning a race and come into the organization, and then you start to understand, well, what does winning within an organization means? And that's different for everybody. In Formula One, we have a very obvious set of targets, but for other companies it might be, winning might be doing business sustainably, winning might be being ultra efficient, winning might be bringing in huge amounts of investor or funding into the organization. And so understanding what winning means, and then having the discipline and energy to focus on that becomes almost it becomes part of the fabric of the company. I'm a very half glass full kind of guy, so I have a sort of certain way of saying it'll always be all right. There's always a way. And I think building that in and getting that across the organization, I spend quite a bit of time with my teams just saying, actually, even if the outlook looks grim, let's say we had a really bad race weekend, or, in the case of some seasons, we've had pretty bad seasons, actually grouping people together and saying, winning doesn't mean standing on the top step of the podium. What winning means is understanding objectives, working towards them, and understanding how you're doing on those. And, what do they say? Eating the elephant one bite at a time. It's about breaking a challenge down into multiple steps and winning at each phase.